Welcome back to America's Fractured Politics. A U.S. citizen is dead in Minneapolis, shot in the head by a federal immigration agent during a crackdown that city leaders never asked for, and residents have been protesting since the moment unmarked vehicles started rolling through their neighborhoods. Before her name reached the public, before her family could process the knock at the door, the Department of Homeland Security had already branded Renee Nicole Good, a violent rioter who weaponized her vehicle and an act of domestic terrorism, as if the coroner's report needed to be co-signed by a political narrative. Minneapolis, however, is not a blank canvas for federal propaganda. Witnesses on that residential block say they saw agents surround a car, bark orders, wrench at the driver's side door, and then fire. And the videos circulating online show a woman trying to drive away from heavily armed men in a street choked with federal vehicles. Not some villain flooring the gas in a cartoonish bid to run cops down for sport. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, after viewing the footage, did what almost no American politician ever does in the immediate aftermath of a law enforcement killing. He called the federal government self-defense story bullshit and ordered ICE to get the fuck out of his city. Strip away the euphemisms and this is what remains. During a massive Trump-era immigration surge that sent roughly 2,000 ICE agents into Minnesota, an officer shot and killed a 37-year-old American woman in her car just blocks from where the last era of American policing was put on trial in the court of public opinion. She was, according to Representative Ilhan Omar and local advocates, not some shadowy cartel figure, but a legal observer trying to document what this sudden federal presence was doing to her community. Minneapolis' own police chief has said there is nothing to indicate she was the target of any law enforcement investigation at all, an extraordinary omission that reduces DHS's terrorism narrative to what it always was, a smokescreen erected over a crime scene. The speed with which DHS criminalized the dead is not a coincidence. It is a method. Within hours, agency spokespeople were on social media and in front of cameras declaring that rioters had blocked ICE vehicles and that this woman had weaponized her vehicle in an attempt to kill them, an act of domestic terrorism. That phrase, domestic terrorism, is doing a very particular kind of work here. It erases citizenship, dissolves the presumption of innocence, and invites the public to view a corpse on an American street through the same lens they have been trained to reserve for foreign enemies. If you can turn a citizen into a terrorist between one press release and the next, then you can turn any act of state violence into a preemptive war. Look closely at how thin the federal justification really is. And DHS is telling ICE was running targeted operations when rioters blocked their vehicles, and our unnamed citizen suddenly transformed herself into a would-be killer by allegedly attempting to run agents over, forcing the officer to fire defensive shots. And the telling of witnesses in the cameras and neighbors' hands, she was boxed in, ordered out, and shot almost immediately as she tried to drive away, with the bullets coming not from somewhere downrange, but at close range into the car she was trying to use to escape. The mayor has flatly said the video does not support DHS's account. The governor has told his constituents not to believe this propaganda machine, and Minnesota's Attorney General is already calling Trump's deployment a causal factor in this death. So what is being defended here is not officer safety. It's the right of a federal agency to operate as an occupying force without local consent. Trump's DHS shipped thousands of ICE agents into Minnesota over the objections of city leaders, turned immigrant neighborhoods and protest corridors into demonstration zones for a hardline immigration agenda, and then blamed the inevitable blowback on rioters when people showed up in the streets. The mayor says the presence of federal immigration enforcement is causing chaos, not safety, that these agents are not here to protect his residents, and he is right, because nothing about this operation was designed with those residents in mind. Minneapolis is not a partner in this project. It is a laboratory. The bipartisan cowardice surrounding this is as predictable as it is infuriating. Locally, you have a mayor openly cursing at ICE, a police chief admitting the dead woman was never a target, a governor activating the State Emergency Operations Center, and promising a full, fair, and expeditious investigation. Nationally, you have Democratic leaders who spent years warning that Trump would turn federal law enforcement into a weapon now offering mealy mouth calls for accountability that never quite named the shooter or the president whose policy put that gun on that block. On the other side, you have right-wing media already crowing that a rioter got what she deserved and amplifying DHS's domestic terror script verbatim, turning a nice bullet into a morality tale about law and order. This is how a country slides from policing to political repression without ever announcing it. Democrats and Republicans alike have vowed to inflate ICE's budget, expand DHS's authorities, and accept the basic idea that certain neighborhoods, immigrant black porn defiant, are acceptable test sites for tactics that would never be tolerated in wealthier, whiter suburbs. When local officials complain that federal forces are terrorizing our communities and beg them to leave, they are treated as annoying obstacles, not as the people whose consent is supposed to matter in any functioning democracy. The murder in Minneapolis is not an aberration in that system. It is its inevitable output. DHS's language lays bare a doctrine that should terrify anyone who still believes in civil liberties. The Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs went on X to insist that an ICE officer, fearing for his life, the lives of his fellow law enforcement officers, and the safety of the public, fired defensive shots at a citizen whose alleged crime was trying to drive away from them. Under that standard, fear, subjective, unreviewable, conveniently unverifiable, becomes an all-purpose excuse for lethal force. If heavily armed federal agents, backed by armored vehicles and chemical weapons and the full legal machinery of the state, can claim they are a vulnerable party every time a panicked human being tries to get away from them, then there is no act of violence they cannot drape in the language of self-defense. The scene on the ground makes the rhetoric even more obscene. Residents gathered behind hastily erected barricades at 34th and Portland Streets, staring at a crime scene taped off not by their own police alone, but by the very federal agency responsible for the killing. Protesters and neighbors have been met with chemical irritants and lines of riot-geared officers for the crime of demanding to know why a woman was shot in the head on their block. Community leaders stand among them, promising that we do have cameras, we do have witnesses, insisting that no one is above the law, while the federal government's opening move has already been to declare itself judge, jury, and narrator. Somewhere beyond the lights and the lines and the cameras is a family being forced to watch their loved one's death, referred to as terrorism in real time. They are hearing about defensive shots and domestic terrorism and rioters weaponizing vehicles, when what they know is that she left the house alive and came home as a political talking point. Their grief is collateral damage in a propaganda war whose purpose is to ensure no one ever has to say the most obvious, damning sentence. A federal agent, deployed as part of a president's show of force, killed an unarmed American citizen, and then the government lied about it. The investigation has been taken over by the FBI. The Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension has been frozen out of the process. The result will be an obscene whitewash. Unless this moment forces a fundamental break with the premise that federal law enforcement can treat American cities as staging grounds and their residents as enemy combatants, the next report will just be another entry in an already obscene ledger. What happened in Minneapolis is not just another tragic encounter between law enforcement and a frightened driver. It is a test of whether this country will accept the idea that citizenship offers no protection when your government decides you are in the way. When a president can flood a state with ICE agents over local objections, when those agents can kill a legal observer and call it terrorism, when national politicians respond with platitudes instead of concrete moves to shut the operation down, the message is unmistakable. Your rights end where their fare begins. The people on Portland Avenue, shivering in the cold under helicopter rotors and floodlights, understand that better than anyone in Washington. They remember what it meant to watch a man die under a police officer's knee and be told to wait patiently for justice. They know that the only thing more dangerous than confronting state violence is learning to live with it. So they are standing there again in defiance of federal orders and chemical gas, refusing to let this killing be folded neatly into some DHS press strategy. They are doing what a free people do when their government turns on them. They are refusing to shut up, lie down, or look away, as should we. This has been America's Fractured Politics. If this episode resonated, please subscribe, like, and pass it along. Above all, keep up the fight. We are fast approaching an inflection point. Thank you for listening.